Just to say, before we go into our chat that we have with Jackie Lynch about nutrition, you may have seen in the past our lovely little mascot, puppy Peggy, who's very sweetly stepped in, taking the place of Chaos, who was originally our hot flush mascot, but sadly she passed away last week. Lovely Peggy has stepped into her shoes grandly. However, she's not quite got the filming etiquette that she needs to learn yet. She's still in training, and whilst we're talking to Jackie off camera, little Peggy is having a mad moment with her chew, and the sound sounds a little bit odd. Hopefully you can hear Jackie over Peggy, and please bear with us because Jackie's got some fantastic information that's really going to help you with nutrition, certainly if you're suffering with menopause fatigue. So please listen on, bear with us, and hopefully we'll get to the end of our vlog and Peggy by then will have calmed down. Hello everyone.
Hi everybody.
We're with Jackie Lynch, a registered nutritional therapist, is that correct?
That's right.
Yes, and we've invited Jackie onto the hot flush sofa this morning to talk about nutrition, especially nutrition and how it's beneficial for menopause, especially women who, I don't know, going through fatigue. We seem to feel that nutrition is definitely beneficial for that. We're also going to talk about, I don't know, any tips you might have for women and eating healthily through menopause. Supplements, don't know whether they're we talk about supplements and whether they're beneficial or not, and also about your newly published book. Va Va Voom, the 10-day
energy
diet. Yes. So I think first of all we'll talk about menopause and nutrition.
Sure. So there are lots of ways that nutrition can help support the menopause, and I think that one of the things we all need to remember is that the menopause is not an illness. It's a natural process. And the trouble is that many of us struggle with it more because of our 21st century lifestyle than anything else, because women have been going through the menopause for centuries, but it's become more and more problematic. Mother Nature actually had a plan. She didn't just let us go through this thing.
Yeah.
She is indeed. And her plan was that once the ovaries stop producing estrogen, our adrenal glands, which are two little peanut-shaped glands at the back here, just above the kidneys, they produce a weak form of estrogen, just enough to cover off everything that we need, so to protect our energy levels, to support our bone health, and all the other many reasons we need estrogen. The trouble is that the adrenal glands also regulate the stress response, and their first and primary job is to produce stress hormones. And our menopause these days tends to coincide with possibly the busiest and most stressful times of a woman's life.
Yeah.
Usually there's a sort of growing family. It might even be worse if they happen to be going through puberty at the time. That means there's a lot of hormones in the house. Usually at that age, sort of late 40s, early 50s, the level of professional their work, their job is usually far more executive. You've moved up the ladder, there's a lot more responsibility going on, and very often there's also the challenge of supporting elderly relatives as well.
Yeah.
So all of that means that your stress levels are super high, just at a time when you really don't need them to be. So in terms of how nutrition can help, one of the first things I'll do when I'm working in my clinic with a menopausal woman is to start looking at the stress levels and to apply a nutritional approach that would support the body's response to stress. And if I were to give you sort of one quick fix today that I think would work for anyone who's struggling with menopause symptoms, it would be to make sure your blood sugar is balanced.
Yeah. Okay.
Because every time your blood sugar drops, you will produce two of the principal stress hormones, cortisol and adrenaline. And the more that your body is producing these hormones, the less it's able to produce estrogen. So to clarify that, a few years ago, I worked with a woman in my clinic who came to see me. Her last period had been 15 years earlier, but she was getting at least 20 hot flushes a day.
Wow.
And not just the sort of mild rise in temperature that some of us get, it was the full-on sweat, the full-on changing the clothes.
Yeah.
And she couldn't understand it because the menopause was long gone.
Yeah.
And actually it was all about the stress. I ran a functional test which was a saliva test that you can take, which will identify what your cortisol levels are doing at 4 periods across the day, because they're supposed to fluctuate gently, but they're not supposed to be going through the roof. And hers were going through the roof.
Yeah.
And so we worked on a program to regulate the stress levels, to regulate her cortisol, and within 6 months we've got her symptoms down to about 1 minor hot flush a day. So there's lots
That's
you can
amazing.
do.
So I think we all think we know about how to regulate our blood sugars, but actually it would be really helpful to hear what that would look like in a typical day.
Of course. So the body's programmed to keep levels of sugar in the blood in a very narrow band. If it goes above or below that, that's when it creates a state of emergency, because high blood sugar is no good for you and low blood sugar is no good for you. The reason low blood sugar is no good is that sugar is our primary source of energy. So the body goes into emergency mode when the blood sugar drops, because it's dangerous not to have enough sugar in the blood, and when the stress hormones are released, they freak out, which is the technical term. And the reason they freak out is that they are programmed to generate the fight or flight response. And if you do not have the energy, you do not have the wherewithal to fight or run away, the stress hormones are going to deal with things straight away, because that's bad news. So what the stress hormone will do, cortisol in particular, is it will do 2 things. Firstly, it will send a message to the liver asking it to release the sugar stores back into the blood, and it will create the craving by sending a big message to the brain. And you'll know the one, because we've all had it.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's when you can't resist the jam donut.
Exactly.
Or
The craving is never for the green salad. We all know that.
Yeah.
And so it's a double whammy. The liver releases the sugar stores, you obligingly stuff something in, and before you know it, instead of going back to that nice narrow band, you've gone up here. And that's when insulin is released, because our hormone insulin is programmed to reduce excess sugar levels in the blood, because again that's dangerous. So it will send off any excess sugar to the liver, but if there's too much and the liver can't take it all, it will store the rest as fat cells.
Which is our lovely
little
Absolutely. And so
Tommy's bums and thighs.
so you end up in this seesaw, because
Yeah.
the insulin, it's an emergency response, so it won't calculate how to get you back to that nice narrow band. It'll just remove the lot. So down goes the blood sugar, out comes the cortisol. So you can be on this seesaw throughout the day, and just by regulating that's one way of removing extraneous stress hormones. And to answer your question, because I know it's going to be the next one, well, how do you stay in the nice narrow band?
Yes.
2 nutrients you need. One is fibre, complex carbohydrate. So that's going to be things like brown stuff, brown bread, brown rice.
But more wholemeal.
Banished to beige is what we say. And I think we kind of know that we should be doing it, but I think it's really key to hear it from someone like yourself saying, look, this is going to have a real impact on your balancing of the blood sugars.
But it's whole wheat pasta, it's whole wheat,
That's
whole
right.
grain.
Whole grain pasta, brown rice, and so on.
And number 2?
Number 2 is the protein, because complex carbohydrate is burned through the body much more slowly. So that will give you sustained energy and stop those peaks and troughs. If you add protein to that, protein's hard to digest, so it will slow down the release of that carbohydrate even further and keep you going for longer. So then you're not prey to those desperate cravings for sugar or carbohydrate that upset the blood sugar. I mean, basically what you should be aiming for is protein and fibre with every meal and snack. So that doesn't have to mean chicken with your porridge or anything like that. It's if you're a cereal person in the morning, then stick with cereal, but add a tablespoon of pumpkin seeds or menopausal flaxseed, because there is some suggestion that the lignans in flaxseed may help hot flushes. Truth is, the jury's out, because the studies are sort of 50-50, but either way it's a top source of protein.
But
it's not going to do you any harm.
So it's definitely going to help in
It's a
lots of
win-win,
ways,
as we like to
and
say.
it might support your hot flushes. So there you go.
So do you feel that any supplements are useful for any?
Well, yes, but you do have to be really cautious about supplements, in particular herbs. because just because something is natural doesn't make it safe.
Mm.
And herbal medicine is, people have to study for years to apply herbal medicine, and you need to be conscious that if you're on any medication, either nutrient supplements or herbal supplements might interact with that. So check with your doctor before you do that. You need to make sure that you know what you're doing. Never exceed the dose on the bottle, because with nutrients in particular, more is not more. Less is usually more. You need to understand, for example, that minerals will work in opposition to each other. If you have too much of one, it'll reduce the other in the body. Now, for example, you might have read somewhere that zinc's really good for colds, so you go and stuff yourself with zinc to get rid of a cold. But that will then knock out levels of copper in your body. Now, if your copper levels are low, you're going to feel absolutely exhausted, because copper deficiency mimics the symptoms of anemia. And another common symptom of copper deficiency is anxiety. And again, that's a real issue.
Menopause issue, yeah.
So really, a balanced diet is far more beneficial than trying to supplement it.
Well,
do you think?
I mean, to be fair, supplements have their role, but I always like to just sort of make sure that people understand the importance of
well, I think
using
that's
them
the thing.
carefully.
Yeah.
I mean, the other thing to understand is that they all work in synergy. There's no one food that only contains zinc or only contains magnesium. So they all work together. And so one thing you could do is take a really good quality multivitamin and mineral, because then that's a good base. You're getting a bit of everything. Which is how Mother Nature intended it to be. And then if you're looking at supplementing elsewhere, what I'd really look at is probably getting some proper advice to make sure that you're getting the right kind of thing, because some herbs can be effective for hot flushes, but it will depend very much on the individual woman. So don't assume that it will work for you. One size really doesn't fit all with nutrition, and it's about making sure that you do what's right for you.
I think the one that we've been told by the GP is vitamin D is the one that, especially this time of year when you're not getting enough sunlight and possibly omega-3 as well.
Yes, well vitamin D is it's not actually a vitamin at all. It was misnamed when it was first introduced. It behaves like a hormone.
Or another fact for the day.
Because it's so important to our health that we actually produce it ourselves, and no vitamin or mineral is produced by the body. The best source of vitamin D is the sunlight, and because it's fat soluble, it can be stored in our fat cells. So if you've had a really good exposure to sunshine over the summer, really good quality sun, a high sun as well, then you've probably got enough to keep you going till about December. But it's well known now that in the UK, so January to March, most of the population are now deficient in vitamin D, to the degree that Public Health England are now suggesting that everyone should be supplementing every day with about 1,000 IU of dosage. We also know that vitamin D is about more than just bone health. Of course, bone health is incredibly important for menopausal women, but we now know that it has a huge impact on mental health. So if you're someone who struggles with low mood or anxiety, checking vitamin D levels are incredibly important. And although it is in food, it's in tiny doses. So you'll get it in small amounts in dairy, in tiny amounts in oily fish. Liver is probably the best source of it, and most people don't really like liver. And of course, if you're vegan, you probably need to really make sure that you're getting your vitamin D levels tested to make sure that you've got enough to see you through.
Interesting.
Dosage, so 1,000 milli... No.
IU, international units. It's measured slightly differently because it's very hard to actually regulate the quantities of vitamin D in micrograms. So they create something called international units, IU. And one of the great things about vitamin D is because it's fat soluble, if you're someone who's always forgetting to take your supplements, because not everyone's good at this, you can vitamin D load. So you could take a large dose that would keep you going for 3 weeks.
I really like the sound of that. I think the term is not very compliant. I'm kind of tip all the
or just go on holiday from January to March.
Yeah, no, that
the Caribbean.
But no, that's really useful actually, because one might think, oh, I'm not taking it. Oh God, it's not going to do its work now. But to know, I guess it's not going to work retrospectively, but you can.
Just really for the record, unless you've been told to do otherwise by your GP, you should probably stop at about 1 megadose of 10,000. Don't exceed that.
Okay.
I mean, that's just binging.
I think we'll put that on. I think we'll put all of this on a blog because it's really interesting information, and we'll put lots of bullet points.
So now, next, your book. Tell us
Va Va
about
Voom.
Va Va
There's
Voom.
no Thierry on me, I checked.
So tell us the concept behind that, because it sounded a little bit like the way we can set up our website.
Va Va Voom.
Yeah.
Here it is in all its gorgeousness.
Yeah.
Va Va Voom. I wrote it because I see so many people in my clinic who complain of tiredness, fatigue, low energy, and it transpires that 1 in 5 GP appointments now relate to either tiredness or fatigue.
And it's incredible.
It is incredible.
It is amazing.
And as we all know, it's so difficult to get an appointment that actually, if we can take steps ourselves, they should be giving this out in the NHS, I think.
Yes.
Oh, well, obviously I
Let's
agree with that. But the problem is, of course, sometimes it can be related to a medical condition and a GP will run all those tests. But once that's been ruled out, if you're still feeling exhausted all the time, it's probably diet and lifestyle. And so, I wrote this really for everyone who's just fed up of feeling tired.
Yeah.
It's a 10-day energy diet, but it's also got a maintenance plan, because the 10-day diet's a bit of a reboot, if you like, to sort of get you back on track. And then the maintenance plan takes into account the fact that, stuff gets in the way. We have social occasions, we have things. You don't want to give up certain foods forever, but it just helps you work out how to have them in a moderate way so that you don't undo all the good work of the 10-day programme.
So did you sort of deliberately go with 10 days thinking if you made it too long, people would just find it difficult to stick to, or is there some sort of thinking behind?
Well,
why
of course,
10 days?
lots of thinking behind it.
Of course.
The main thing is to demonstrate to people that you can make a difference in 10 days.
Yeah.
It was more about that.
I mean, that is quite a nice thing to know, that that's all it takes, really.
Yeah,
great.
I mean, you can really make a difference in about a week, but 10 days is a good time, and I think, as you say, it's a very manageable time.
Yeah. I love the fact that you've got these quizzes, because I love a little bit of a quiz that will identify and it'll tell me whether I'm this type of person or that.
I created the quizzes so that people could start to identify what perhaps might be the relevant issue for them, because there are different types of tiredness. Some people struggle with energy highs and lows, other people struggle with a sort of sense of physical weakness or lack of stamina. With other people it's mental energy. They might feel loss of concentration or motivation, or just generally tired all the time. And so the quizzes are grouped into those different areas, specifically to help you identify what type of tired you might be. And then from there, there's a chapter on energy boosters and a chapter on energy robbers, and it will help you identify which of those boosters or robbers you might want to go straight to have a look at, so that you can apply your own personal energy approach as well as following the programme. You can actually think, okay, well, I did the one which showed that magnesium's a bit of an issue for me, so I really want to focus on the magnesium and all those foods in the diet that really look at magnesium. I'm going to make sure I have plenty of them. So it helps people take control of it rather than me just applying a diet that they think they need to have.
What I like about this book is that you don't have to sit and read the whole book. You can go straight to, I think it's chapter 5 where you get into the diet itself.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I think that's really valuable because
again, it's another one of those things.
If you're time poor, and I think that's something that we have with Hot Flush. We go, some people don't want the big picture. Some people just want to go to what's going to make them feel better.
Absolutely.
And why.
And the truth is that when you're completely exhausted, the last thing you need is something that seems too overwhelming. So that's why, right at the beginning I say you don't need to read any of this if you don't want to. Go straight to chapter 5 and just get cracking. Because otherwise the too difficult light can come on. It's a modular diet, and there are 2 types. There's either the Energizer or the Super Boost. The structure is, I've focused on blood sugar balance, I've focused on anti-inflammatory foods, because low-grade inflammation is one of the most common causes of regular fatigue.
And we've got joint aches and pains as we hit menopause, so that's
always a good thing.
An awful lot in this for us.
So you start out with eliminating the obvious suspects, which will be things like alcohol, caffeine, sugar. You'd also remove wheat. You don't remove gluten, but wheat, high levels of wheat in particular, can really make people feel quite sluggish. So I offer rye as an option. If people still want bread, they can have rye bread. They can still have rice. And of course you can still have loads of things like meat and fish and eggs.
So it's not a diet of deprivation.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
And then as you work through, you'll be gradually eliminating certain things. You'll be eliminating grains a little bit more, so that when you finally get to the cleansing day, it's a fruit and vegetable only day. Just one day.
One day. I mean, one day is pretty.
We can all do that.
Yeah, we can do that.
Yeah, it might be harder than you'd expect. The whole principle is blood sugar balance. And the
course,
more your blood sugar is balanced, the less you're going to get those sugar cravings.
Of course,
So it will help you as you work through. And I've included a number of recipes so that you make sure you're feeling full. If you're constantly feeling full, then your brain is going to be in charge of your food choices instead of your hormones. So that can make a big difference.
So it's changing behaviours really, because
Absolutely.
you
Yeah.
don't
It's training
no longer
yourself.
having those cravings.
It's a great day just to sort of reset things, and then you start to work your way back through the days, so that you go back onto the the Va Va Voom days, the cruising days, and so on, until you finally got to these days that would transition you back to where you were before, except now you're feeling more energized, and then you can move on to the maintenance plan, where yes, you're going to be allowed caffeine, yes, you're going to be allowed alcohol,
but at least you know what your triggers might be.
Exactly, and it advises you how to do that and how to stick with what you want to stick with.
Fantastic. Well, there we go. Va Va Voom, the 10-day energy diet.
I think there's actually another vlog in this, because I think we'll probably be racing to do this.
We are. We're definitely
but,
going to have a go with this
really
one,
interesting.
because if you're suffering menopause fatigue, diet is one way of actually trying to combat it. And seeing that, there's no harm in trying, is
And
there?
it's a win-win. I think this would cover quite help with a lot of
absolutely.
other symptoms.
There's one last thing we'd like to ask you, Jackie, because when we spoke on the telephone, you told me of your menopause symptom, which is not in our symptoms list, so we might have to add another one into that. But you, what was your symptom?
Oh, it was a real treat. Having always had incredibly regular periods, bang on the dot, would last 4 days, never a bother. I suddenly started vomiting on day one for about a 2-hour period, quite uncontrollably. Couldn't do anything about it. I didn't know what was going on, because this happened in my late 40s, and I periods were still regular, and all I knew about the menopause at that time was that they got further apart, and nothing like that was happening. If anything, they were starting to get heavier, which, as we all now know, is very classic.
Yeah.
But no one ever talked about it.
No,
so of course I went to the
necessarily.
GP. I had scans. They had no idea what was going on. There was nothing wrong with me. So it was just one of those things. And it only happened that I mentioned it to my mum after I'd been struggling with it for sort of over a year and getting really fed up. And she said to me, "Oh, well, now you know how I felt." And I had no idea. And then when I thought back to my teenage years, I remembered that she would often be being sick. But because she used to get migraines, even when I was a young child, she used that. She just said that's what it was.
Yeah.
And it was only later, looking back, that I realised that as I moved into my 20s, suddenly Mum wasn't being sick anymore. And when we talked about it, it was such a relief, because I don't know anyone else who's had this symptom.
No, and it's a new one too.
And it lasted nearly 4 years, because although I
God.
regulated everything else, I couldn't manage. Oh, the joy when they finally started getting further apart.
Yeah,
and
sure.
And
getting
could you feel it coming, or is it just wow?
It was very. I'd suddenly feel very nauseous, and then I had a short space of time, a very short space of time
to get somewhere.
Yeah.
Well, they do say that you will have a very similar menopause to your mum. So women out there, if you're able to talk to your mum, well, not if you're able to, I mean physically, if they're still with us, and you can talk to them, ask them about their menopause.
Well, Jackie, thank you so much for venturing south.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. Get the book, Va Va Voom, the 10-day
And I
energy
really
diet.
hope you managed to hear, we definitely had an intruder on the pitch for most of this. If you had padding and panting, it wasn't us.
Thanks everybody.
Bye.
Bye.